Good afternoon and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We're excited to have over 300 registered attendees for today's special webinar, which is eligible for 1 credit from the ACI. Let's get started by giving one lucky attendee a Webinar Wednesday lunch bag for answering this week's trivia question. Today is National Tequila Day. In which country is the town of Tequila located? Answer now using the question feature on your dashboard. While you're answering, I want to invite everyone to save the date for our Fall MD Expo, which will be taking place at the Hilton Baltimore Inner Harbor in Baltimore, Maryland. The dates are October 17th through 19th, and we look forward to you joining us for 3 days of learning, networking, and the latest advances in medical technology, products, and services. Registration is open now for the MD Expo, and you can find more details at mdexposhow.com. All right, let's find out who the winner for the Webinar Wednesday lunch bag is. Linda, who's this week's lucky attendee?
Our lucky attendee this week, Jamie, is Joshua Pinion.
Well, congratulations, Joshua. You knew that the correct answer was Mexico. Tequila is located in the country Mexico. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsors, Scenario, Medigate, and Nivolo. For more information, please do visit their websites, scenario.co, medigate.io, and nivolo.com. Our panel of presenters today to discuss cybersecurity are Leon Lerman, co-founder and CEO of Scenario, Simeon Utabor, Director and Pre-Sales Engineering at Medigate, and Ben Person, Vice President of Product Marketing at Nivolo. Leon, you're going to go first. You may begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Jamie and Linda. Glad to be here. We're Scenario. My name is Leon Lerman, and we're securing the IOMT ecosystem, the Internet of Medical Things.
Leon, I hope you can hear me. I'm afraid that you've muted your line. Can you unmute yourself? There we go.
Yes. Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Perfect. So I wanted to start with what is the IOMT ecosystem, the Internet of Medical Things. And there is a common misconception in which people think that it's just about the end devices, the patient monitors, the MRI machines, the IV pumps, etc. But it's really about a wider ecosystem. Those end devices typically communicate to gateways like PACS systems. They also communicate to different servers like RAS, LAS, CIS, VNA, and others, and there's also a lot of middleware involved, like interface engines and terminal servers, which help to translate a lot of the proprietary communication protocols into HL7 and other higher level protocols so that all the data can reach the EMR. And this entire ecosystem is widely connected, hyper-connected, and also is not properly protected. And we consider this ecosystem to be today the weakest link in the hospital from various reasons. The first one, it includes a lot of insecure communication protocols like HL7, DICOM, ASTM, POCT1. Many of the protocols do not support encryption, do not support authentication. There's a very long life cycle for the medical devices, and it's very difficult to patch them. Many of them were not built with security in mind. We're still seeing a lot of devices running Windows XP, Windows 95, and even older versions. And lastly, a lot of those devices are invisible to IT security teams and solutions, and they cannot be properly protected by standard traditional IT security tools that hospitals are using today. Another thing is in terms of hospitals, talking about tools they're using, so they have this very common procedures and methods to secure their IT devices, like microsegmentation, like access policies, access control policies, and different incident response workflows. The reason they are able to use those different methodologies to protect their organizations is because they have a very clear understanding on how the different architecture of the IT devices look like. So if we're talking about a web server, it's very clear how internet access in the organization looks like, which servers are involved, and how the flow is working. Same for email, of course, in the organization. The challenge is that when we're talking about medical devices, this is not the case. It's very common for hospitals not even know how many devices they have, where they are, how are they connected, and in which workflows are they taking part in. Another challenge that there is, and we would like to call it the Game of Thrones challenge, is this organizational challenge between IT security and the biomed department. While the IT security is more responsible for the security posture of the organization, and they typically understand security really well, sometimes they lack the knowledge of how the medical devices connect and what are they doing on the network, while the biomed teams, they typically have a very good understanding about the medical devices, where they are, how they operate, but the security challenges are typically not the main job they have. So these two teams typically need to collaborate together to achieve a successful security program for the medical devices. In summary, what we kind of see is that the notion of it's really difficult. You cannot protect what you cannot understand. And this is why we created Scenario to specifically solve this problem. So Scenario, we're essentially an agentless, non-intrusive solution specifically focused on the medical devices and the healthcare IoT in hospitals. We are a network-based solution that gets a copy of the communication from the core switch and essentially providing 4 key capabilities. The first one is the visibility. So we automatically discover and classify all the different devices on the network. Once we identify the devices, we assess the risk. We understand what's the risk those devices pose towards the organization, including which vulnerabilities do they have, and also what's the impact those devices have on higher level business goals like patient safety, availability, and data confidentiality. Once we assess the risk, we then go ahead and look at what the devices are actually doing. Who are they communicating with, and in which medical workflows are they taking part in? And then we detect anomalies once they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing. And the last step, we're taking action. So we're integrating with all the relevant tools that hospitals currently have, like firewalls, like network access control systems, ticketing systems, and essentially making them medical device aware, feeding them with the relevant context and policies to protect the organization and prevent and remediate any potential threats. Just to give 2 brief examples about kind of like the medical workflow technology that we're using under the hood to understand the medical device behavior. So in this example, it's you have the Epic EMR, you have the RIS, you have the PACS, and you have the different modality devices. The use case is that a patient gets into the hospital to take a series of MRI scans. What happened behind the scenes? The patient is being admitted by the nurse. There's an HL7 ADT message that is being sent to the RIS. In the RIS, there's a log that says patient ID number X has just arrived to take a back MRI scan. Then the MRI uses DICOM, a unique imaging protocol, queries the RIS, asks it, who's my next patient in line? I'm now ready to accept him or her. The patient gets into the MRI. There's a log on the MRI that says the MRI just performed a scan, following a DICOM CSTOR message sending the image to the PACS for storage, with a corresponding log in the PACS with the same patient ID identifier, which allows us to connect this workflow to the same patient. HL7 ORU is sending the test results to the EMR, so it can be accessed by relevant physicians and personnel. And lastly, you have a DICOM MPPS message. The MRI lets the RIS know, I finished working with this patient. I'm now ready to accept the next one. This is a workflow that our system is able to learn automatically in the cloud using machine learning. And one of the benefits of it is when you have an anomaly like this one, when the MRI was infected with malware, and then it tries to use a malicious DICOM command to steal data from the PACS, we can identify it as an anomaly because it's not part of the workflow. We know that for the MRI to communicate using DICOM with the PACS, a few things need to happen before that. The MRI needs to perform a scan. There needs to be a modality workless communication with the RIS. A patient needs to be in the hospital in the first place. All that didn't happen here, and this is why we're flagging this as an anomaly. We'll say in scenario, we focus on identifying how the good looks like, how the normal behavior looks like by identifying the relevant context, the relevant workflows, and identifying the different devices. And that really helps us to identify any bad things that are happening to the devices in a lot more accurate way without using any signatures or any known patterns. Just to show a quick, another quick example, in this case, you have a doctor that wants to access specific image in the PACS. So the doctor uses its workstation, opens the EMR portal, types in the name of the patient of which he wants to see the image of. Behind the scenes, what's happening is that the EMR is being constantly updated by the PACS with the relevant reference pointer, the relevant path of where the images are being stored. This information is then being sent back to the doctor's workstation, who's using SMB, FTP, or HTTP with the relevant reference pointer to access the specific image in the PACS. This is another workflow that we're able to map and understand exactly how it happens. Now, let's say the doctor's workstation is infected with malware or ransomware, for the example. The ransomware will essentially try to encrypt multiple files in the PACS using SMB. In this case, the ransomware doesn't know to access the specific path in the PACS. It will just try to encrypt multiple files there. Therefore, it will not have a reference pointer, therefore not part of the workflow, and therefore it's an anomaly, which we'll be able to identify and basically remediate immediately by integrating with the relevant network access control solutions or firewalls to isolate the relevant devices, prevent the spreading of the ransomware to ensure patient safety and data protection. Thank you very much for your time. In summary, we're Scenario. We're providing with full visibility, security, and confidence to biomedical engineering and IT security in hospitals. Thank you.
Leon, thank you for that introduction to your company and the services that you can provide. Next, we're going to hear from Simeon, who is a representative from Medigate. Simeon, you'll also have 12 minutes to give us up to 12 minutes to give us a brief introduction to Medigate, your company, the services and products as well. We're going to hold tight until we can switch presenters, and we'll be able to see Simeon's screen at that point. But Simeon, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can. You should be able to now share your screen with us.
Absolutely. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Not quite yet. Here we go. It is loading. Yes, perfect.
Okay.
All right, Simeon, the floor is yours.
Okay, excellent. Hey guys, welcome to Tech Nation. My name is Simeon Otubor. I am the Director of Sales Engineering here at Medigate, and I want to kind of give you guys a quick intro into our product and our platform. Now, first and foremost, we're kind of similar to our Scenario. We're a medical device security platform. We focus primarily on medical devices, again, through passive network inspection. So let's just go through a couple of quick use cases here with regards to how we do what we do and why us. Our product is focused around really 4 pillars. First being visibility. So visibility into not just the IOMT or the the Internet of Medical Devices, but also the IoT devices. Right? We believe that there are medical devices, and there are also things like cameras and badge systems that also kind of require security. Now, they don't require the same type of security as IOMT, and IOMT definitely is its own separate entity. But however, we'd like to take a look at things as far as all things that exist in the clinical settings, whether it's biomed or general IT. They all kind of require protection per se. The next thing we tend to focus on as well, again, is around the idea of contextual anomaly detection. right? So when things start to behave separately, because we have clinical understandings of how these devices should work in an environment, similar to getting into scenario, but also down to the actual traffic patterns, right? What device should be communicating to what? Should the MRI machine, should I be speaking to, a printer per se, or, is that part of the clinical work setting overall? And then following that, we also then try to focus around like the clinical enforcement policies. So by having deep integrations into your NAC systems and things like, Cisco IEST or Palo Alto, or more of like the vendor side of things or the network side of things, we're also able to drive, some value by having, clinical policy enforcement and knowing that, okay, this MRI machine should only have these protocols available because, that's what it needs to do its job. And then lastly, of course, is the idea that, we can also drive, healthcare technology management insights, right? Whether it's through things like utilization and understanding, okay, we have this fleet of devices, but only X amount gets used for this period during the day. So therefore, potentially there's chances for us to have greater insights and greater efficiencies into how our devices gets used. So I want to give a quick kind of my presentation today is kind of focused around like, how we can help around clinical risk management. And the idea here being that first and foremost, the challenges are fairly straightforward. You can't protect what you can't see, right? So, and currently today, there is a very much limited visibility into, not just the IoT side of things, but especially the IOMT side of things, right? The medical devices and the actual visibility from a cybersecurity perspective or from a biomed perspective is fairly limited, right? But however, if we are able to have an actual inventory system that has, unique device identifiers down to serial number, down to application version, down to, the actual application and the operating system running those devices, then we can have an actual complete device inventory. And we can also use that to track our utilization metrics, again, completely passively, right? We don't need to be in line. We simply get a copy of traffic going through the network, either via tap or via a span. We can provide those visibility. The next challenge that's common in this space is the idea of location and tracking, right? Where is this device? It may have been written in the, in the CMS as being in floor 1, but it may have been moved over the last couple of weeks. So how do we, correlate and triangulate device locations? Did this device get put in, in a truck and leave the building, or is it still in building? So by interrogating and interacting with things like, your wireless systems or your wired systems and understanding where in the physical space the device is, we're also able to reduce, location and reduce the time spent locating devices, and therefore actually have, location-based data either directly in our CMS systems or even in our IT tracking systems. And then, of course, following that is the notion of patching, right? How do we prioritize patches? When we know that, some devices need to be patched or devices need to be fixed, how do we prioritize our overall maintenance? Right? How do we make sure that devices that are at most at risk for our network are the ones we properly prioritize and, take actions on first, right? Having a system like Medigate that's able to, tell you, hey, and create risk scores based on devices and how much risk they pose to the network, and also how much that risk has a potential of how bad that risk could potentially be, so to speak. Having those things readily available also really does help drive the reduction in risk in clinical settings. And by having that, patch prioritization, we're able to then say for things like, send out direct alerts when there is a match of new alerts to our device that may exist in your network. I'm sure many of you today have a system of having to go crawl either the manufacturer websites or the FDA's websites to find a new announcement of either a new patch or a new vulnerability. Well, with a Medigate system, we can actually have a more proactive approach where you can actually receive those alerts as they come out and also correlate that risk directly to the devices that are directly in your inventory. A common approach that this shouldn't be taken, but sometimes is taken, is the idea of scanning devices. While that's good for general, security, it doesn't necessarily play well in the medical device space because it's just too risky to have them to potentially be running scans. By using like a more of a passive approach, we're able to solve that solution because we can see all the priorities and all the attributes that are necessary for this device, and therefore reduce the overall clinical risk to the environment. So just a quick kind of, what is gained from Medigate perspective as to what's not gained if you didn't have a deep packet inspection technique of some sort, right? The general IT or the general IoT vendors in the space, for the most part, can provide you with things like an IP address, a MAC address, and from that information, they might be able to correlate, the manufacturer name or even maybe the model device. However, in the clinical settings and in the clinical engineering space, more information is required, right? We need more context into the device. There simply just can't be, oh, it's a model X from manufacturer Y. We need more information, such as what application version is running, what protocol does this information use, what exact type of device is it? Is it a patient monitor? Is it a ECG? What exact type of device is this, right? And then also what VLAN does this exist in? What AP this device last associated to? So the deeper the insights and the deeper the amount of information we can provide, the more useful that information can be as we try to solve the risk that's inherent in the medical device space. So as far as value goes, we're here to, for the most part, provide you with identity to the unknown, right? The medical devices, where they are, what applications they run in, what serial number is associated to this device. The deep insights for the devices that are unknown is a core value of what we can deliver here. In addition, we help reduce the risk of successful cyber attacks by knowing the exact clinical workflows this device should operate in. We can help realize immediate ROI through our utilizations. So we know the exact devices that are functioning, how much of the scans are being done by the DICOM machines, how much of the ECG machines are being used at what period in time. So really able to drive the return on investments by knowing the utilizations across the fleet and also across individual devices. We can also protect the invisible, I should say. A lot of these medical devices are for the most part invisible to the cybersecurity team. By bridging the gap between the biomed team and providing more information to the cybersecurity, we truly believe we can help manage the undetected and also then therefore protect it. As to why mitigate, well, the questions are simple. First, we are healthcare focused, right? We're not a general IoT company. We can solve the general IoT use cases, but we have deep clinical insights and clinical visibility that's focused primarily around healthcare. Secondly, we can provide for a deep granular discovery of the medical devices and as well as the IoT devices in the clinical environments, right? We only sell to hospitals. We are focused on hospitals, but we don't just only focus on IoT or IOMT. We also provide visibility into the IoT devices. The third functionality, of course, is the deep integrations. We have deep integration partners with folks like Cisco, your CMS systems, Nuvolo, who should coming up next, the integrations there as well too, and just a general list of integrations we can provide with different kinds of use cases. One of the reasons our customers tend to choose us is that we get very engaged with them to understand their use cases and provide a deep level of customer support to the folks we partner with. And of course, lastly is the Mitigate Lab section of our company, where we actually help the manufacturers try to find the risk in these devices prior to coming or to going to market. So that really is a nutshell, overall quick briefing on what Mitigate does and who Mitigate is. So with that said, I think I can pass it on to the next presenter.
Perfect, Simeon. Thank you so much for that information. You're right. Now we're going to go and pass the presentation on to Ben Persons from Mitigate. Ben, I know that we are about to switch the screen over. I'm going to take one quick moment and just remind the attendees, after Ben's presentation, we're going to move into the live Q&A to where you can get some answers for your cybersecurity questions. So be sure to chat those in using the question feature on your dashboard. We'll get through as many as we can, time permitting. Those that we aren't able to get to, we will pass to all three of these presenters to follow up offline. Ben, I can see your presentation. Can you hear me?
I sure can, Jamie. Thank you. And thanks everyone that's presented thus far, and appreciate everyone's time today. Yeah, as Jamie mentioned, my name is Ben Pearson. I'm our Vice President of Product Marketing here at Nuvolo. I also run our pre-sales technical team as well. Just a little background on myself. I've been working in the healthcare and been involved with healthcare pretty much my whole life. My mom's a retired nurse. My sister's a respiratory therapist. My wife is a clinical engineer. And, so I live and breathe this both professionally and personally, and very passionate about this space. Now, a little bit about Nuvolo. Nuvolo is a modern CMMS platform, and the previous two companies that just spoke talked about their cybersecurity solutions. I'll share a little bit about how we connect the dots and how we bridge your CMMS platform with a modern system like Nuvolo to your cybersecurity solutions to drive that automation, drive that automated action when there's a security event, when there's a brand new medical device on the network, when there's a vulnerability associated with the medical device. And I'll talk more about that today, but it's really important to have that end-to-end visibility and end-to-end automation with your CMMS to your cybersecurity solutions in the end. So I'll share a little bit about Nuvolo and healthcare. Healthcare is our primary focus when it comes to our business. And we have a lot of hospitals, healthcare systems, healthcare service providers, anything from small hospitals to very large, some of the largest hospitals in the US and even internationally running on Nuvolo as their CMMS system. So some of our investors as well, GE Healthcare, who's GE Ventures, one of our investors, Kaiser Permanente, also one of our investors and one of our large customers. So just to give you a little bit of background on the focus in healthcare and the fact that we are a very much healthcare-focused CMMS system to drive that exact need of the healthcare and HTM organization with solutions that you need to run your hospitals around the country. So why Nuvolo? Why are we here at this panel today? What we've done over the course of the last few years, as things like WannaCry came out a couple of years ago, I was here at Nuvolo during that, and I remember the reaction of how people scrambled and to address that issue. What we did at Nuvolo when that occurred was we built out a module designed specifically to address the connection between these cybersecurity solutions that were actively coming to market to address this, and also to bridge the gap between your CMMS data. And what previously happened was we saw there was a gap, right? We had these vulnerability security products that are on the network, and we just heard from two great companies, Scenario and Medigate. And the previous world was IT typically had their own security products that existed within a healthcare organization. And they didn't have the ability to identify and detect exactly what that device was. You just heard from both of the previous vendors. These companies now, like Scenario, like Medigate, can actually get the level of detail to know, is this a medical device that's vulnerable? Is this a new medical device that we discovered? And now we want to connect that data into your CMMS system automatically. So what we want to be able to do is identify and catalog all of your connected medical devices and the data in a single CMMS system as your source of truth. Your HTM organization today treats their CMMS system as their source of truth, right? It's where you work, it's where you operate, it's how you run your HTM organization in terms of understanding what devices you have, where they are, what state are they in, and the information needed to protect them. So that's something that we've done. It's one of the challenges that we've seen previously is that CMMS systems haven't bridged that gap to these cybersecurity systems to know the details needed to know who is ultimately responsible for that medical device. Where is it at? The details that we can now glean from those devices and actually take action and automate things like work order generation and notifications out to your HTM and even your IT security departments when there's a vulnerability or when there's an item that needs to take action. So that's where we come in. I'm gonna give you one example. I actually did a webinar a couple weeks ago on Bluekeep. If you guys aren't familiar with Bluekeep, it's a newer vulnerability. It came out here in May, and it reminds me a lot of WannaCry, to be honest with you. Everyone saw the security vulnerability. Even Microsoft stepped up and even provided patches to these legacy operating systems that are no longer being patched. But what it did was it exposed the vulnerability in what's called a remote desktop protocol. If you're not technical, what that is basically a protocol that allows typically, IT or support teams to remote desktop or remote control a PC, right? So what this did was allowed attackers to gain access to these vulnerable operating systems, and without any real, I'll call it cyber knowledge, a very basic attack person could get in and have command and control of your medical device, right? Or any operating system that was vulnerable, but typically a medical device runs a larger risk. So why is healthcare particularly vulnerable with this particular issue? Well, 70% of devices in health organizations are running unsupported Windows operating systems. And the reason being is you guys are running medical devices in your hospitals well past the Microsoft life of an operating system, right? You're running medical devices for 10 to 20 years, and typically an operating system is only supported by Microsoft for, sub 10 years typically. So what we see, if we look at statistically, operating systems in healthcare, 60% roughly are running Windows operating systems. 41% are other variants, whether it be mobile or embedded operating system or a network, firmware. So patching in healthcare can be a challenge, right? Because and I ran a patch organization in another role. Patching, as was mentioned by Medigate, actually, agent-based patching isn't really an option when it comes to medical devices, right? You typically have to physically be at a medical device or physically obtain a patch from your OEM to actually patch that device, and that usually requires you to physically be at that device. You can't use historically, Windows-based patching solutions to bulk deploy patches. And 30% of healthcare deployments, if you look at it, they have 40% of healthcare deployments have over 20 different operating systems. So you think about the complexity of patching all of your medical devices in your environment. And 30% of those had over 100 device vendors. So you may have to work with those vendors to obtain a patch in those cases. So just that sheer number of connected medical devices, and it's only going up. About 2 years ago, I heard it was around 20% of medical devices in hospitals are connected, and that number continues to increase as new medical devices are replaced, as you do your capital planning and replace those medical devices. So more and more coming in with network connectivity. So you have to address that. You have to address the risk and the challenge, but also the benefit that it brings to the organization. So that's where I'm looking at when we think about this threat and this risk. Vulnerability scanning is only part of the solution. This was a note that came out by Forescout. Forescout's a cybersecurity the company. And when we look at that identifying and auto-classifying devices, so it's not just sufficient to simply detect a device's IP address. And a lot of the historical cyber solutions that are out there, as was said by, I think, Medigate, you said this, right? Historical devices, they can see that, hey, there's a vulnerable device on the network, or I found a new device on the network. But all I know is its MAC address, its IP address. I don't know if it's a medical device or not. I don't know enough about it, right? And that's where new modern cybersecurity systems are coming to play. And what they're saying is really it's not just about now the detection and the detail about it, but it's actually the automation, right? It's taking the data from these cybersecurity solutions, extracting the information from them, and then determining what's the purpose of this device. Is it a medical device? Who owns it? So having that information around department, right? Who's the actual support organization for that device? What's its security posture? Right, this information needs to feed into a real-time asset or CMMS system, as we're talking about today, to drive that access control policies and allow your teams, your HTM organization and your security team, to respond quickly to that targeted attack on your network. One last slide here, and then we'll talk about kind of the future of the solution. So I'll just build this slide out here so we can just kind of talk through the whole thing. It's a little bit busy, but on the left-hand side is what we're talking about when we talk about scenario and we talk about Medigate. These future cybersecurity solutions that are out now to address IOMT are now able to feed into Nuvolo's cybersecurity module, which gives us the data that we need from an identification, remediation, orchestration perspective to feed into our CMMS module, which then kicks out automated tickets to both clinical, but also your facilities organization, because sometimes it's facilities, even an MRI or a CT, right, supported by IT, facilities, and HTM. So being able to kick off those automated work orders, and there's 3 typical things that we're looking to automate. Discovery data, right? Finding brand new medical devices that got put on the network that aren't in your CMMS system. Nuvolo, we can automate the creation of that new medical device, set it to a state that requires review, a proper onboarding process that gets asset tagged and brought into your network appropriately. So we can automate that discovery and onboarding into your CMMS system automatically when Scenario or Medigate finds a new medical device on the network. The second is around vulnerability management, being able to automate if there is a vulnerability. I use the Bluekeep example, but it could be WannaCry or whatever comes out next, right? And automating, hey, here's a vulnerability in the wild. Which medical devices have an out-of-date operating system and have an out-of-date operating system that has this particular vulnerability around remote desktop protocol in that last example? So vulnerability management, right? And then if there's actual threats, if you have a device that's compromised, being able to automate the entire life cycle, creating work orders to clinical engineering, but also passing over to your security operations team in IT. The example that was used in Scenario was really good and showing kind of the 2 sides of the fence of IT and HTM. But we can bridge that entire picture and automate that ticket creation, whether it be to HTM or facilities or IT, depending on what that issue is. So that's in a nutshell what Nuvolo brings to the table with a modern CMMS platform, bridging with our cybersecurity module to these vendors like Medigate, like Scenario. And that's where, like I said, we come to the table and help our customers across the healthcare space in driving that full end-to-end visibility and automated work creation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and actually pass it over, back over, and allow us to open up for Q&A at this point.
That's great, Ben. Thank you so much. As Linda is taking control of the presentation to pull up our slide, I'm going to go ahead and move us into the Q&A portion of the webinar. Attendees, I know that you have submitted some amazing questions, so I'm excited to share them with the panelists. Just to make sure everyone's aware of the format, I am going to go around the table again, beginning with Leon at Scenario, next Simeon, then Ben, and we will continue in that pattern until we exhaust our time at 3 Eastern today. So Leon, you're going to have the first question. The question that came in from the attendees: how is your solution able to properly prioritize risk?
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. So the way we're prioritizing risk, we're actually looking at 2 main attributes. The first one is, of course, the vulnerability, how critical the vulnerability is, and what's the implications. But I think the even more important part is the impact. It's very important to understand what's the role of the medical device. What's the potential impact this device could have on business goals like patient safety, service disruption, data confidentiality. If a device is a ventilator and it has a risk on it that could potentially impact patient safety, should be prioritized higher. If a device has a lot of PHI on it, it may be more of a concern for data confidentiality and privacy. So taking those parameters into account can really help to prioritize the different risks and deal with the important ones first.
Great, thank you, Simeon. I have a question for you as well. Are you working with manufacturers to support medical device security needs?
Yes, absolutely. We have a section of our business called Medigate Labs, as I alluded to during our presentation, that's catered towards manufacturers to help do, pre-market research. We also do, in fact, we are in Philips's, Hall of Honors for discovering many of the CVEs prior to, or many of the CVEs that actually have been discovered by Medigate Labs. So we actually do function very closely with the manufacturers to try to figure out devices either are vulnerable out in the wild, or try to figure out vulnerabilities for these devices prior to them hitting the market.
Perfect. Ben, I have a question here that I think's perfect for you, representing Nuvolo. When I hear about new vulnerability, is there any way I can see on my CMMS a report or a notification for any of my devices which are vulnerable?
Yeah, Jamie, great question. Absolutely. So with Nuvolo's cybersecurity, we actually have a dashboard designed specifically for that actually shows us everything from new devices discovered to vulnerable devices on the network. I use that Bluekeep example, but it could be WannaCry. Being able to quickly identify what devices are vulnerable to this new vulnerability that just came out, and getting that latest data, as was just mentioned around CVE data from our cybersecurity vendors. Yeah, being able to quickly see, hey, these devices are vulnerable to that latest vulnerability that came out, and then automate work order creation to take action on that, and even physically finding those devices where they're at within your hospitals.
Leon, can your solution discover devices that are running on generic hardware or medical apps?
Yes, the answer is yes. One of the discovery methods that we're using is not based on signatures, it's based on identifying the different behaviors of the devices, understanding exactly to whom are they communicating with and which way, and again, in which flows are they taking part in. And that helps us to identify devices that are running on generic hardware that cannot be identified using signatures. And it also helps us to identify workstations that act as modalities, for an instance, because their specific behavior is very indicative on what type of a device it is and what purpose does it have on the network.
Okay. And Simeon, how do you ensure that your library of devices is always current?
Yes, we have quite an extensive research and development team that's focused on constantly learning new medical devices and always learning from our deployed customers. And also, again, as we mentioned previously, we work closely with the manufacturers to also understand new devices prior to coming to the market. So it's more of a joint effort between our internal research development and understanding our customers and understanding what's in the clinical network environment and also the IoT environment. But also, it's also with the close partnerships we have with the manufacturers as well too.
Good. And Ben, identifying vulnerabilities on a network is one thing, but what do you do if we don't have enough clinical engineering staff to patch them fast enough? What are your thoughts on this challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. There's, some of the things that we see is the need for additional staff to physically go out and address things like getting these devices patched on your network or physically doing an inventory of these devices as well. And we have partnerships with some of the key vendors in this space to be able to actually go out and do physical inventories, do physical patching. So that's something that we can certainly help with as we look at addressing getting people physically out to address getting devices patched and back up in to current patch state. Absolutely.
Good. Leon, I have another one for you. How is your solution effectively detecting anomalies?
So yeah, so our solution is looking at the different medical workflows, understanding exactly how the devices should be able to communicate. And then when there's a deviation from this workflow, we're able to effectively detect the anomaly. And another thing I wanted to mention is that we're also looking at the relevant context and the relevant impact of the device, because another challenge is to be able to prioritize the different alerts and handling of these alerts by severity, and understanding which alerts and events can really impact important things like, again, patient safety, availability, confidentiality. So by understanding the importance and the role of the device, you can also prioritize the alerts accordingly and deal with the important alerts first.
Simeon, I have pulled this great question from an attendee that I think would be perfect for you. With so many new vendors coming into the cybersecurity space, how do you know which one to partner with? What should they look for?
It's a great question. I think it's about domain expertise. It's knowing the vendors and the manufacturers who truly understand your business and have a domain expertise in the things they're talking about. What I mean by domain expertise is that do they have a strong understanding of clinical workspace? Do they have a strong understanding of the biomed workflows and pre-canned understanding of how devices communicate to themselves? The amount of knowledge they have in regards to the space they're going to be working in is very, very important. Medical device security is it's a new market, but cybersecurity is not a new market per se, right? And there are a lot of vendors who are hoping to pivot their general IoT space or the general IoT technology into the clinical environments. So I would say, just make sure the customers or the vendors you want to go with and the vendors you're hoping to partner with really do have a strong domain expertise and have a strong understanding about the business of, clinical engineering and biomed.
Good. And Ben, I have a question that's kind of a two-part question, so I'll go slowly for you. How do you handle different devices being owned by different groups? Who does the vulnerability patching? Some of my devices would have to be patched by the manufacturer. I might even have to ship them back for patching.
Yeah, Jamie, this is a common question. It's sort of that finger pointing a little bit. So like for example, when WannaCry came out, a hospital, for example, that had contracts with outsourced service providers, maybe they had also had OEMs involved in the conversation, but there was sort of, who's responsible, who's accountable for getting these devices patched and addressed when that, WannaCry came out, and BlueKeep's no different, right? And in the end, the hospital and the HTM organization that like I said, puts patients on devices, they're ultimately making sure that this is addressed. And they have to hold their vendors and their OEMs accountable to that. One of the things we're seeing, Jamie, is even healthcare organizations that are fully outsourced. Maybe they send all their HTM work to a third-party outsource provider. While they still have to hold them accountable, they may stand up their own Nuvolo system with their source of truth of asset inventory to be able to manage and maintain and make sure and hold that vendor accountable to the device security that they ultimately are putting patients on, right? So I know it's a long-winded answer, but that, like I said, ultimately the hospital needs to make sure and hold their OEMs and their service providers accountable to that.
Great, thank you. And Leon, I had a question come in specifically for your company. Does Scenario require a SPAN or a TAP on the main network?
Yes. So we need to get a copy of the traffic of incoming and outgoing traffic of the medical devices. So typically we do that using SPAN or TAP or port mirror from the relevant core switches of the hospital.
Great. Simeon, as an HTM, what can we do during incoming inspections, existing devices, and decommissioning devices as cybersecurity point?
Yeah, I think it's just having a strong system that can populate that automatically, like Medigate, that has, a strong visibility tool that lets you know exactly where you stand. Ultimately, I think the first pillar in any of this is going to come down to visibility and having a tool that can provide you with a deep insight with all the contextual information available about those devices, so you can start kind of prepping about how you want to protect these things. We're fully aware that not all these devices can be patched per se, right? Some of them may just require mitigating, network controls. You may not have a patch available from a manufacturer per se to fix your DICOM machines or fix your CR machines. However, you can put them in a separate VLAN, and once you understand the exact workflows and the exact ports and communication patterns of this device, you can then write the proper ACLs to properly segment these devices so they're only doing what they need to do. But again, you can't quite get to that level of segmentation and security from a cybersecurity perspective unless you first have the visibility, which is again is like the first pillar of any kind of cybersecurity program.
Great. Ben, I have an attendee that's looking for a little clarification. What is the exact meaning of agentless?
Sure. Yeah, it's usually a question. Agentless just means that, as you heard from Medigate and Scenario, what it means is it's basically solution. Medigate and Scenario can explain their system more, but it means that you're not putting an installation, a cybersecurity installation on the medical device itself. Agentless just means it's listening to network traffic over the network for traffic patterns, and not to speak for the other cybersecurity systems. You guys are smarter on that than I am. But it basically allows that to happen. Agentless, meaning I'm not putting anything on your medical device to be able to get the data that I need from a cyber perspective to then take action, update discovery data, right, new found device, vulnerability data, et cetera, being able to do that passively, not actual with an installation on a medical device itself. Would answer that question.
Thank you. And guys, I'm going to see if we can get through one more round of questions. We've got about 10 minutes left in our allotted hour today. So Leon, can you define IoT and IOMT respectfully?
Sure. So IoT relates to Internet of Things. It's a general term that talks about devices that are essentially not part of IT or EMR that have connectivity capabilities. And IOMT, the M, is essentially talks about Internet of Medical Things. And in general, it relates more specifically for the medical device ecosystem. And there is a differentiation as the medical devices have their own unique characteristics, connectivity capabilities, and different security measures that you can take with those devices, as my colleagues talked about in this conversation. Yeah, that would be my definition.
Perfect. Simeon, if these systems are partnered with Cisco, then why would we not just buy Cisco's Medical NAC that does the same thing to profile and identify medical devices based on new flows?
Yes, so Cisco's NAC actually is not as comprehensive as you would want to believe. In fact, we actually do partner exactly with Cisco in clinical environments to provide the richer contextual information that's not available in that library. I would suggest you look into, Cisco had quite a really good documentation on, healthcare and biomed segmentation place. And, a lot of that conversation during Cisco Live was about, additional tools like Mitigate and, our competitors providing that richer contextual information that's more available that's richer than what's available today natively from Cisco. So even from Cisco's own mouth, they are saying that, these products are required to have that deep, medical biomed visibility into the devices themselves.
Great. Ben, an attendee has asked this question. Both of the IOMT vendors seem to focus on medical devices specifically. Do you think it's recommended that an institution would need to purchase an additional product to manage the IoT devices?
So that's, certainly, when it comes to cybersecurity in a healthcare organization, you do need to look at more than just your medical devices. So not going to speak to all the other cyber solutions out there. I would just say that don't forget about your facilities IoT devices as well when you're thinking about your medical devices, just because there is, you think about an imaging device may have also facilities components, same with some other components within a healthcare facility. So because Nuvolo supports both facilities and HTM, and we integrate with those cybersecurity platforms that take advantage of everything, don't forget about facilities. That's all I would say, and because there are other IoT devices than just medical devices in a hospital that are vulnerable as well. So that's the one call out I would make.
Perfect. Guys, I appreciate your time today and the information that you've shared. I know that cybersecurity is a very timely topic. There are always new developments, so we appreciate each of you representing your company. Attendees, you can see that their URLs are posted on your screen now. I encourage you to visit their websites, learn more about these companies, give them a call and see how they can help you. And of course, thank you for such a great and interesting webinar. I do want to just remind everyone that now our webinar survey and certificate process is automated, and I hope that you find it more convenient. The survey link will be included in a follow-up email, which you will receive in about an hour's time. It's going to come directly to your inbox. You'll be able to click a link to take the survey from the email that you receive. After completing the survey, you'll be able to download the certificate for your 1 credit from the ACI. Once you have completed the survey, you download it immediately. Again, just a reminder that 1 lucky attendee will win an Amazon gift card for completing the survey. If you have any questions, you're always welcome to contact us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. And for more information on upcoming webinars, don't forget to visit webinarwednesday.live. We're going to see you back live again next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Make it a great week.